Horses Sleeping in Trees, the audiobook, Chapter 49, Spirit in the Sky. Ensconced in the verdant hills of Bellevue, Washington, there was no denying it. My illustrious, and up to that point, incident-free career in pyrotechnics was petering out. I had navigated the highly volatile field impressively, building and detonating perhaps 100 bombs over 5 years, mostly for their exhibition of surprising power. How could something so small be so big at the same time? I thrilled in the concussive sound they produced that could be felt deep in the belly. Rarely did any meaningful destruction occur as a result of my hobby, save 1 or 2 mailboxes along the way. I was prolific and became the go-to guy in the neighborhood whenever needs of an explosive nature arose. There was one modest and unfortunate incident I do recall at the outset of my career. I received in the mail my first small pyrotechnics package, discreetly wrapped in plain brown parcel paper. The return address said Allied Industries. It had arrived. I recalled the tiny ad in the back of Field and Stream magazine a month earlier at Mr. Christie's barber shop and the name of the company that my mother had made the check out to. It was my flash and smoke powders, plus a 30-foot coil of shiny red, waterproof fuse. I was in business and elated. I rushed into my room, tore open the package, and per the instructions, mixed the flash chemicals, inert when separate, the instructions noted, together thoroughly in a large plastic bag. The instructions were clear: only mix by hand or with a wooden blending tool. Never mix with metal implements or in a metal receptacle. Sparks could be a problem, I surmised. Once combined, they were transformed into 2 pounds of highly flammable and a very explosive chemical compound. This I found hard to believe, but I was only 11 at the time. Chemistry class was still years away. In fact, I managed to dodge chemistry class my entire academic career. I figured I'd had enough of it anyway by the time I hit high school, and was guessing the thrill of classroom lab work would likely pale in comparison to my hands-on activities in the natural lab I roamed daily, the streets of my neighborhood. I headed outside with a small paper cup full of powder and poured a measured amount, maybe a tablespoon, onto a 2x6 board in the backyard. Kneeling down, I put a lighted match to it. Whoomph! The small but powerful blast gave me a shock. It was as bright as the sun with enough force to singe my eyebrows. I had a heck of a time seeing for a couple of hours. Any light was excruciating. I just sat in my dark den, pondering the power and brilliant explosive nature of the freezer bag full of silvery powder tucked at the back of my underwear drawer. That day, with explosives, I learned that sometimes the lessons could be forceful, swift, and of high impact. I was impressed. I also learned rule number 1, always use a fuse. Later I would learn it was better still to deploy a cigarette timer to allow ample time to vacate the blast zone. In the years that followed, my mom became increasingly reluctant to order my flash powder. It may have had something to do with the near torching of my bedroom with the lamp and World Book Atlas, or the ride home in the squad car on the 4th of July when the Bellevue police officers confiscated my bag of bombs. I'm guessing that Mom and Dad must have realized at that point that my small hobby had morphed into something much more. Regardless, times had clearly changed, and Mom's enthusiasm for reordering my supplies had fizzled out. With only a few ounces of powder left, my smoke powder had long been burned, I decided to build my last bomb. I scrounged around in Dad's shop one afternoon and found a steel pipe with 2 end caps. He never even went near plumbing So this combination of bomb-making materials was unexpected, to say the least. It was meant to be, I told myself. Drilling a hole in one of the end caps, I was ready to go. All that remained was filling it with flash powder, screwing on the cap, and fitting the fuse. I was strangely uneasy as we walked out to the car that afternoon. I had asked Dad to give me a ride up to my friend's house in the Bellevue Hills, where I was going to spend the night. In my jacket pocket was a very deadly pipe bomb. We motored along, the hits of 1969 playing on the Lincoln's premium stereo. "Spirit in the Sky" was one of my dad's favorite songs that year. A staunch Glenn Miller fan, I thought that was a pretty groovy thing. I'd never heard of Norman Greenbaum, the musician behind the song, and would never hear of him again. As we waited in the drizzly gloom at a stoplight below the railroad trestle at the entrance to our neighborhood, I had serious reservations. I felt morose. Here I was, sitting next to my dad with a pipe bomb in my pocket. If for some odd and impossible reason it detonated, it was likely we both would be killed. This was not funny or cool. I realized I had strayed way across any line of reasonable and rational behavior. He dropped me off at my buddy Mark's house. He was waiting outside. We headed immediately to the woods down the street. In the Pacific Northwest, there were woods at every turn. Hiking along a skinny trail, we searched for the appropriate spot. The drizzle had dissipated. Before long, in a small clearing to the left, just off the trail, we headed in. There, with few words spoken, I pulled out a cigarette and lit it with a match. I puffed it a couple of times, tore off the filter, and slowly twisted it down onto the bomb's fuse, far enough to secure it, but not enough to light it, while I held it in my hand. I'd laid the bomb on the open ground, and we both walked away up the trail, maybe 100 yards. We sat down and waited. The detonation should occur in a couple of minutes. While waiting, we talked some about the odds that at that very inopportune moment, someone else, maybe even a kid, might wander along the same trail and into that clearing. The probability was low, we concluded. We didn't want to think much about it, and fell silent. The explosion shook the ground, and both of us deep in our guts. Bits of shrapnel ripped past. We actually saw earth and grasses soar into the sky overhead, followed by dead quiet. We were up and running in a moment and quickly entered the clearing. We stopped short. There before us was a large crater, 3 feet across and 2 feet deep. Smoke drifted up out of the hole. We were stunned. How was it possible that this seemingly small device could wreak such havoc? The sight of a deep, smoky crater in the hard clay ground imprinted on both of us the power and the potential destruction of this bomb. We were not prepared for the immensity of it. Somehow, over the years, the ladyfinger firecrackers had morphed into black cat firecrackers, and cherry bombs were eclipsed by M80s, and then by devices of serious destruction and certain death. Neither of us was very amused. The thrill and elation I usually felt after a concussive boom was oddly absent. We slowly hiked up the trail in silence, lit cigarettes, and headed along the street to his home. There was an enormous pot of spaghetti with garlic bread on the side, served up by his mom, and we gorged, while washing it all down with Dr. Pepper. We watched some TV and listened to the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. Later, he suggested we visit a couple of girls he knew who lived 2 blocks away. A cool, misty night with light rain greeted us as we stepped outside. We paused, reassessed our plan, and then hustled up the wet street. That was the last time I made and detonated a bomb. In the days that followed, I was haunted by the image of Dad and me sitting together in the Lincoln, below the railroad trestle in the drizzle at the red light, with the pipe bomb in my pocket, listening to Spirit in the Sky. With some string, canvas, and determination, Dork and I figured out how to camp comfortably in South Miami. It's up next, Chapter 50, and it's called Sleeping in Trees.